Welcome, everyone. My name is Kaliroi Stavrianou, and on behalf of Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, I'm very happy to moderate this series of webinars. Those series of webinars aim to educate, promote collaboration, and also promote information exchange about healthcare technology, engineering, and patients' outcomes. All our webinars are recorded, archived, and also live streamed on Facebook. Following the completion of the webinar, the recording material will be accessible on our website, www.globalcea.org. Please note that at the bottom of the screen, you have a Q&A button where you can submit questions to the faculty, and those questions will be addressed usually towards the end of the webinar or during it. In addition, for posting general comments, there is the option of the chat box, which is for audience interaction. Today's webinar is the 6th in the series, with the title National Clinical Engineering Associations Certification. Why is it important and how to develop a national certification project? Now I'm very pleased to give the floor to Frank Painter, who is moderating this webinar. Frank Painter is a certified clinical engineer, past program director at the University of Connecticut, and the first chairman of the Healthcare Technology Certification Commission. Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kaliroi. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to see such a large group of participants. This is really wonderful. It means it's an important topic. So yes, so that as Kaliroi mentioned, we're talking about clinical engineering certification today. This is a rung in the ladder of professional development. And we're going to talk about why it's important. And we're going to talk about the development process that each country has gone through in order to develop a national certification program. And many countries are in the early stages, and some countries have been doing it for some years. So a few administrative things. We're going to approach this webinar in a way where we have presentations, and then we'll have one question for the presenter, and then the next presenter will go. And at the end, we're going to hopefully have some time where we can address all the rest of the questions as a panel of presenters. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box. It's important that you do that. If you submit it in the chat, they'll get lost and I won't be able to find them. But in the Q&A box is reserved for us to submit questions. And I'm going to introduce each speaker before they speak. They all gave me a 1 or 2 page biography. I've shortened it to 4 or 5 sentences. So if I misstate, or this is to the presenters, if I misstate or missed something, please correct me when you get the microphone. Then one last announcement. Dr. Jitendra Sharma is the one who gets the award for being the most, the attendee or the presenter who is most inconvenienced by this. It's almost 1 in the morning in India. So we are going to let him go first, and then we're going to test him to see how good he is and see if he can stay awake till the end so he can join the panel at the end. So with that, let me just give a brief introduction of Dr. Sharma. He's the Managing Director and Founder, CEO of AMTZ, Asia's first medical devices manufacturing park. He is the Executive Director of the Callum Institute of Health Technology, which provides medical technology policy recommendations to the government of India. He's an adjunct lecturer at the University of Adelaide and chairman of the Indian Biomedical Skill Council. Dr. Sharma has been awarded the European Union Indian Young Leaders Award at the EU Parliament in Brussels. He's also been awarded the AAMI Laufman Great Batch Award, which I know is a prestigious award. And he's also been awarded the ACCE Clinical Engineering Excellence Award for his distinguished work in the medical technology sector. And with that, Dr. Sharma, please.
Thank you very much. Greetings to all colleagues back there on screen. Thank you, Callie. I have 10 minutes and I will try to cover everything that I have to say within those 10 minutes. Broadly, when you look at a country like India, which has humongous caseload, COVID or no COVID, the absolute number of caseloads, and you have a much lesser density of trained certified clinical engineers, when you propose a program for certification, obviously the stakeholder asks, what would it bring on the table? What would it give to the practitioners? And I think that's the first question all of us needs to answer in our own context. In my context, it gives three things. One, it allows us to standardize the skills across various levels. Two, and that's point number two is immensely important for any country that is facing unemployment greater than or near around 10%. Number two is it brings in a pay parity. And number three, it allows us to incentivize on the job training. So what did we do? We approached the Quality Council of India, which is the quality certification agency across all sectors in the country. And we approached the National Skill Development Agency under the Ministry of Skill Development, not in the Ministry of Health. And this is also a learning for me that dialogue and discussion on skills go better with Ministry of Skill Development than Ministry of Health in many countries for some reason. Thankfully, the Ministry of Skill Development and the Quality Council of India agreed to accredit 5 job roles for clinical engineers / biomedical engineers. Those 5 job roles are mentioned as certificate in biomedical engineering, biomedical maintenance, biomedical manufacturing, biomedical quality assurance, and biomedical project management. Now, these are 5 job roles that in Indian context made sense. Now, you see a word NSQF there, which is essentially a National Skill Qualification Register, which means the 5 job roles which were accredited through which certifications could be provided to the practitioners were all listed in the Skill Qualification Register of the country. Next, please, Kelly. So what do we do is we train people, but we have a faculty of institutional partnership with about 64 regional institutions in the country, which provides us the faculty necessary for our certification program. And we undertake, you allow applicants to undertake a skill certification. They can choose 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 out of 5, depending upon the number of 5 out of 5 job roles, depending upon the number of years of experience they have and the basic qualifications they have. Now, here there is another contextual reality. Many engineers in India do not have a university degree. They have something called ITI, which is equivalent to a diploma. So you have then 3 cadres. You have diploma holders who after their 12th grade went to a 2-year basal engineering college. Then you have BTech, the bachelor's degree, and then you have the master's degree. And these 5 job roles are actually required to cater to that heterogeneity among the professionals. Next slide, please. And we can go faster. So this is eligibility. For some, we have eligibility as bachelors, and for some we have masters, for some we have diplomas. Next slide, please. Next slide. These are slides on the 5 job roles. The essential thing is before we certify them through the examination procedure, we train them, we coach them, not just on clinical engineering, but also on aspects of patient safety and on communications that are required to be done by a clinical engineer in a hospital with other healthcare professionals. Because many times it is this communication which is not allowing them to use their skills sufficiently. Next slide, please. These are simply pictures. They are trained through rigorous process of exposure to multiple factories. Again, we can skip these slides because these essentially provide, for example, biomedical maintenance has a module on radiation safety, which the other other certification module may not have. So whatever the applicants can literally choose a job role which they think is commensurate to the job potential they will have in the market, and then undergo certification rather than vice versa. Next slide, Kelly. Yes. Again, we can skip these slides because these are explanations of the 5 job roles. Next slide, Kelly. This is again immensely important. Biomedical quality assurance. The one previous to this was biomedical manufacturing. In fact, AMTZ itself is a huge consumer of professionals that undergo certification in biomedical manufacturing. Now, this is also something, again, a best practice. Countries that have a medical technology manufacturing base, like India, like Canada, like the US, like Germany, we need to have a specific module on biomedical manufacturing, because biomedical manufacturing again would require skill sets that are very different from biomedical maintenance in a hospital. Next slide, Kelly. Biomedical project management. This course is simply to test people and certify whether they are trained to, for example, set up a linear accelerator facility in a hospital. Or something like an MRI. So it's not for repairing a gadget. It's it's to certify their skills, whether they are having the suitable skill sets to manage the value chain that brings in a project which is biomedical in nature. Next slide, please. Now, people who have skill certification, they may also have large failure ratios, which actually discourages applicants from coming in. Because if your pass percentage is anywhere less than 75 or 80, then the applicants tend to lose their passion and encouragement, because they are not sure if they will pass. So as we certify people, we also need to train them. So we have an arm called Skill Vigyan, which essentially means skill in science, supported by Ministry of Science and Technology, that allows people without a conflict of interest, allows applicants without a conflict of interest to choose modules for skill upgrade and then expose themselves to the exam, which leads to certification. Next slide. Again, something that was immensely useful, oxygen concentrator training program. Thousands and thousands of people were trained. These slides are a bit outdated. It was made in the first round of COVID, but then now there are thousands of people who are trained in oxygen concentrator alone. This also gives us another area of attention, because many countries may have a specific medical product, medtech product, that may require very specialized training, like changing of zeolite in the zeolite tank of an oxygen concentrator. Now, if the density of oxygen concentrator is very high, you would rather train more people on oxygen concentrator than on CT scan, for example. Next slide, please. We also have a unique program on medical technology logistics. This is a neglected area globally. Medical technology logistics. Now, you look at vaccine cold chain. There are modules, training academies that train you on logistics on vaccines. But do we have training on, say, medical logistics required for radioisotopes? No. Do we have training required on medical logistics on RT-PCR cold chain? No. And therefore, as disease change, as patterns change, as markets change, we also need to pick courses that are more relevant today than what the courses that were relevant 20 years ago. Next slide, please. These are, again, training programs. We can skip these slides. Yes, a lot of training programs. Most of them are there on our website. This is Skill Vigyan. Skill Vigyan is the training arm before certification. It's supported by IBSC, but with no conflict of interest. The IBSC, the Indian Biomedical Skill Council, is under Ministry of Skill Development, whereas the training is under Ministry of Science and Technology. Next slide, please. Yes. These are batches and batches of trainees that undergo almost every week. Um, Large number of companies, large number of hospitals are now clients that support training. So they know that when they invest on training people through a structured program, it is they who would benefit from certified people in market when it comes to recruitment. So gradually, these stakeholders have come to understand the reality that training is precursor to certification. Next slide, please. These are faculty development programs, right from 3D bioprinting to research methods on biomedical production engineering, biomaterial testing and industrial applications. These are very high-grade specialized training programs to further support complex areas within the medtech. Next slide, and I'll close in, say, 3 to 4 minutes now. Entrepreneurship development program as part of biomed is also immensely helpful. Next slide. Yes, you can skip these slides. Yes. Yes, I should have shortened the slides. Apologies. This is the third vertical. So here is the interesting thing. A country like India with over 6,000 colleges did not have a single master's program in medtech. We only had bachelor's program. And when we did the harmonization of the Indian Biomedical Skill Council along with vis-a-vis AMI or those in UK, we realized that many modules which are required are not taught in India because we don't have a master's course. And therefore, we partnered with Skill Link. It's an edtech, education technology company, pan-India, and we partnered to roll out India's first program on executive master's program in medical technology. The program has 9 courses that are fundamentals, 5 specialized courses that based on product verticals and specializations an applicant wishes to acquire, a 6 months training in over 100 center campus that AMTZ is, followed by skill certification by the Indian Biomedical Skill Council. So the idea is while we executed our strategy of national level skill building and skill certifications in 3 dimensions, the certification, the training, and the master's program, eventually we converge it so that anybody who undergoes education program through a master's degree also automatically gets exposed to a certification at the end of the course. Next slide, please. I think these are my last 3 slides. These are just the list of courses. As fundamentals, you will have the presentation to share with the colleagues. These are electives. In electives, we have major areas like imaging and radiology, electronics and instrumentation, product design and development. Next slide. And we have large number of partners. Now, this is my last message for the day. The more number of partners, like a train, tie up with you, the more successful you are in training and skill building. The more you work alone, the less popular you will be because your capability to penetrate the young minds immensely gets reduced if you don't have people to institutional partnerships to back you. So we thrive on institutional partnerships nationally and globally, and that's our key to success. I hope I was on time. Over to you, Frank, and thank you for this lovely opportunity. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Very good. And you were on time, so 3 cheers. We have one question for you. The question is, are these professionals required to be registered with professional bodies? I think another way to ask that question is there a central database or a central organization that keeps track of all of the professionals in the profession and you draw from that? Or is this just a separate activity?
So that's a very, very interesting and extremely critical question. We had, and this is something, a question everyone will have to face one day if they are leading the work of setting up a skill certification agency. should they have first a body that that has the databases of skills, or first should they have a body of professionals? And we chose the first option. We first created a body in the National Skill Qualification Register that is a database of all skills. And eventually, when the critical mass of professionals who have been certified becomes large enough, then we end up creating that body just to minimize our administrative effort and lot of organizational politics that otherwise would creep in too soon. And we hope that now we are about 3,000 plus people in India certified by Indian Biomedical Skill Council. The day we reach about 7,500, we intend to create that professional body that would have the database of all people who have been certified, because it would have crossed a critical mass, which is meeting the needs of our healthcare context.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll resume our normal schedule of speakers here. And by the way, just a side note, between the speakers and the participants, we have over 130 with us today. That's very impressive. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Yandi David. Dr. David is a biomedical engineering consultant. He has been the director of the Biomedical Engineering Department and the Center for Telehealth at the largest medical center in the United States. He holds academic appointments and has served as chairman and member of the FDA and FDA advisory panels, and has been a technical advisor to the World Health Organization. He has received top awards from the FDA, ACCE, AMI, and the Italian and Chinese Clinical Engineering Associations. And he is the editor-in-chief of the Global Clinical Engineering Journal. And from his biography, the list goes on and on. But I'm sure you would rather listen to Dr. David than me introducing him. So with that, Dr. David, please.
Frank, it's a tremendous pleasure that a friend is introducing you. I appreciate the kind words. Looking forward to hear Timothy and Brian after we heard from Dr. Sharma and the interesting program he introduces. I would like to do two things. One is to present a polling question to you to find out what the state of understanding and support there is for a certification program around the world. And the second part is to put the foundation around when we talk about certification, what does it mean as far as professional credentialing, and what does it mean as professional behavior to be such a person, to be a professional. So let me start by presenting the polling questions. And the polling questions would have 6 questions. And I'm going down the list here. We'll take just a few, literally a few seconds, I would say maybe 10, 15 seconds for you to read and answer the questions. And mostly is trying to figure out, do you have a clinical engineer certification program in your country? Yes, no, I don't know for sure. Do you see benefit from reciprocity, recognition of program by one country from another country in clinical engineering certification? Again, don't see a benefit. There is some benefit, very important. Going to number 3, should clinical engineering graduate also have certification if they want to practice, or just graduation from academic institution is enough? Number 4, should engineers be certified in clinical engineer by credentialing, meaning that if they have a diploma, that's enough, or should they also take an examination, oral and written one? Question 5, do you believe that practicing as clinical engineer require certification? And number 6, should a practitioner without engineering degree be permitted to be certified in clinical engineering? Are the any possibility they might be qualified to take the exam and be certified. Interesting questions. Let's find out what you think about it. And we will go back at the end of the webinar and try to see if we move the needle at all by listening to the presentation. So Kaliroy, let's count down from 5 for 5 more seconds, and we'll close the polls. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's see the results if we can. So question 1, do you have certification program? 50% do not. 35% of the audience says they do. Not sure is said to read. If you're not sure, that also have a significant negative benefits. Do you see benefits from countries recognizing each other? You can see that it's almost 2/3 of you said it is important. Should clinical engineer graduate have certification if they want to practice? You can see that 3/4 of you, almost 75%, said that after academic degree, they should have certification. Question 4, should clinical engineering be certified by credential only or take examination? You can see that over half of you said that it's insufficient evidence for competency if you don't take the certification. And then number 5, do you believe that practicing clinical engineer requires certification? Yes, very important. And yes, both of them, almost 90% said we should. And the last question, should practitioner without engineering degree be permitted to be certified? And 35% says no, and almost 60% said if they have enough experience, 20, 25 years, maybe they should. Very interesting. We'll come back to that, and let's go to the presentation. And again, I will meet the deadline, make it short. Kali, let's go to the slide. And let me start by saying that if, heaven forbid, you have a heart problem, and Timothy can tell us a lot about hearts, you're probably going to seek a cardiologist for advice. If you went to Colorado to have a ski vacation and skiing downhill, you met the tree, unfortunately, and broke a limb, you will going to be looking for orthopedics. If your child, heaven forbid, has some kind of sickness, you're going to be looking for pediatrician, not allergist, not heart surgeon. You will look for pediatrician. But when your hospital administrator have a question about connecting infusion pumps to the pharmacy in order to be able to automatically upload the pharmacopoeia or the formulary update to the infusion pump, who is going to ask? Is he going to ask the clinical engineers? And the point I'm making is that healthcare has depended upon competent professionals from multiple fields. The cardiologist, the orthopedics, the pediatrician, all the physicians, surgeons have non-domain and publicly profess their expertise, and healthcare delivery system became to depend on that. We know exactly, if you want to have a heart program, you will have to hire cardiologist, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Why clinical engineering profession is not like that? Maybe we're not a profession, maybe we're an occupation. And that's a question. If we are a profession, and we'll answer the question in the next couple of slides, then we have to behave like professional. And I will challenge not only the people on this webinar listening to us, but everybody in the clinical engineering field, that if we don't take care of our professional businesses if we don't emphasize the need to profess publicly what our expertise is and what is the boundary of domain of knowledge that we bring to the table, we are not going to have a profession for very long, and we are not going to have a rewarding careers. And I think that that is a significant point that I would like to share with you. Healthcare system has never been more dependent on technologies than today. And the estimate is that tomorrow it's even going to be more dependent on that. And that this field, the sales of medical devices, is projected this year to reach over $530 billion. That means the dependency and the size of the field is such that it's appropriate that we expect that the management of this technological tool will be given to and led by professionals who are competent and demonstrate their behavior characteristics as professional, being integrity, ethically, and with continued education commitment. Clinical engineers and technologies are critical for sustaining the availability of safe, effective, and appropriate technology. And it's important that each national association will see to it that obligation of requirement of the job, just like Dr. Sharma described, are met throughout each of the practitioners in the field. Next. What content that you see on my slides is supported by references, and those are giving the footnote in each of the slides. As we move from national association to the sharing of global unified vision, it's easy to point at the evolution of recognition for our field, even from the World Health Organization, that for many years did not use the word clinical engineers together in the same sentence. And now they are recognizing that it's critical that trained and qualified medical engineering professionals like clinical engineer practitioners be required for the design, evaluation, regulation, et cetera, like the slide is showing, and that the management dependent on having unified terminology and shared threshold of entering the field. Next. So there are certain elements that global clinical engineering credential can share and support. And if we have this global envelope that recognize a unified benchmark, then it will help every locality, every nation to start their own program by copying or extracting segment of this global unified benchmark into their national program. Those are that we are all interested, just like those who practice medicine, that engineering too will have public health, safety, and welfare tasks that are designed to deliver outcomes that are protected from unintended outcomes, unintended consequences. Important for us to realize that we are part of this chain. Engineering at the core is problem solving, and being engineer meaning that you are able to solve problem, and clinical engineer is a solver problem safely and timely. For that, we have to have education and training to enter the field and sustain our career throughout. And we need to have credentialing. Credentialing is the ability to profess that you are meeting the benchmark, and certification is a step within the credentialing program. It's the action of showing that you are understanding what is the body of knowledge and the body of practice, that you have self-assessment, meaning that you are able to demonstrate that you engage in continued education, and that you are evaluated by external entity that says that you met the standard of practice and continuous improvement. Next. Credentialing history is really not new in our field. Back in 1979, there already started the use of terms and qualification for entering clinical engineering field. In 85, the clinical engineering division at IFMBE was created for similar purposes. In 81, Dr. Joachim Nagel in Germany developed a project where he described why clinical engineers in the field need to have training benchmark of demonstration. And in 2012, the International Standard Organization, ISO, published their 17024 standard, which is a standard for body who certified individual performances. And it's important for all of us to be familiar with that, because each national program should be able to comply with that standard. In 2017, white paper developed about the common roles and definition of clinical engineers. And last year, the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance with Clinical Engineering Division became the convener of the International Certification Board, and it is in the beginning. It's not established yet. Next. So making the point that if we are professional, not just having occupation, then professional clinical engineers must have a stewardship, a commitment to serve the interest of the clients. Those clients are patients that at time being in the operating room under anesthesia, for example, are unable to fend for themselves and depend on us to make sure that the technological tool attached to them and diagnose them are appropriately maintained, calibrated, safe, and used appropriately. We are having a set of skill, and we are committed to provide ethically judgment about what is right and what is wrong in the field, and not be subjected to pressure. We must be operating with integrity, again, as the patients are dependent on us, and that we should be promoting the oversight and monitoring of quality of the profession by an outside independent neutral entity, such as what Frank helped to create, that is the certification program in the US. There are critical differences between occupation and profession, and those are that the body of knowledge, it has defined boundary, that if you are practicing in the field, you know what's belong and what does not belong. Give you an example. Yesterday, in the press release from the Hospital of Special Surgery in New York and Charlotte in North Carolina, two hospitals, the press release said that with Italian company Limacom, they produce for the first time on site at the point of care an implantable artificial joint that is uniquely custom or designed for the patient who are going to receive the implant. One hospital did it for a hip, the other hospital did it for the shoulder. The point I'm making is that that implant was created at the point of care in the hospital by 3D printer, who was operated by engineers. And the question is, are those engineers are considered to be clinical engineer, being engineer practicing in the clinical environment, or they're different? If they are, then our boundary of domain of body of knowledge may be expanding as we look forward. And that's the point, that we need to agree that we have a system with known requirement of where the boundary is, and that we need to have mastery of this domain and commitment to selflessly and ethically serve our patient. It should be self-governing by credentialing program. And that's the difference between occupation and professionalism. Next. We have many starts in the business of credentialing in our field, but yet nobody has crossed the finish line as far as global unified program. So James Weir, Frank Painter, who is here with us, Antonio Hernandez, Joachim Nagel, everybody has a national threshold that they have reached and successfully established. We're now looking at International Credentialing Board, ICB, and we hope that this will help, again, those countries that do not have program to understand what does it take to establish, what does it take to run and sustain a program, and can they be helped by those elements that we are providing here. Next, let's do a case study. The one in China that I'm personally involved with. In 2005, they expressed a wish to have a credentialing program in the field of clinical engineering. There are 60,000 clinical engineers practicing in China. In 2005, I agreed to help them to create a program on the condition that the body of knowledge will be identified and that they will seek sponsorship from the Chinese Medical Doctor Association. They did that, and they achieved recognition by the Chinese Medical Doctor Association to be a subcategory of professional recognition of certification by that group. That gave a boost to the whole program, and what you can see that in their desire here in the picture to be professionally recognized, they accepted that English should be the language that they are taking oral and written examination. And you can see on the front desk in the center of this picture on the bottom slide, on the right corner, you see a blue and red book. Those are dictionary, and you can see on some of the other desks, similar book. Those are Chinese English dictionary that are allowed to be brought in the room. Frank did not allow books to be brought in the US to the rooms, but here we did an exception so we can accommodate that. We also took the ISO 17024 as a guidance to oversee the program of the certification body and make sure that there is conformity assessment according to those general practice. The program is active, is running annually except during the COVID-19 pandemic, and they consider to be a very high level and quality program. There is about 40% failure rate in the history of individual taking the exam so far in China. Next. So finally, last slide, recommendation. As we talked about the overall professional standing in clinical engineering, we are at the point where our field is about to explode. The last 2 years of COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated that technical tools are extremely important. The size of the field is larger than ever before, and we need to make sure that we are coming across as professions that have boundaries, have established minimum qualification to enter the field and to sustain lifelong learning. Unlike today, anybody can become and declare that they're clinical engineers at certain locality and start practicing. If you're the patient, I'm not sure that you would like to accept that. We need to change that, and we need to adopt rules that will adapt for self-governing of the profession. I think that having the International Credentialing Board by the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance and CED would make sense to, again, promote national society adapting certification board and credential requirement. And I hope that I contributed a little bit to everybody that is listening here today on the webinar to begin to demand that in their locality, they should have a certification program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yadin. We appreciated that information. We are going to hold the questions to the end so that we can accommodate the last two speakers. So let me introduce Tim Zakutny. Timothy is a professional engineer with a master's in health science and clinical engineering from the University of Toronto. He has 20 years of experience in clinical engineering and practices at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute. He is a member of the Canadian Medical and Biological Engineering Society and the American College of Clinical Engineering, and recently received the Outstanding Canadian Biomedical Engineer of the Year Award. He's a member of and former chair of the Canadian Board of Examiners for Clinical Engineering Certification. And with that, Timothy, please.
Thank you, Frank. Wonderful presentations, and I'm very grateful for being invited to actually present to this group. I consider myself an extremely, maybe obsessively proud clinical engineer. So I welcome the opportunity to talk about this. So next slide, please. What I'm going to sort of go through here is quickly, because I'm sensitive to time, and I know we've got some wonderful speakers. I'll just talk about Canada and how we've initiated and gone through our certification process. And just to carry on what David was saying, you know, we've leveraged our partnerships with the US Board of Certification and tweaked the process somewhat to meet the Canadian environment. So I'll talk a bit about that, and then just give you a snapshot of what certified clinical engineers are in Canada, and then a little comments about why and how, which is probably one of the most important questions to piggyback on what David was saying. So next slide, please. The purpose of our Canadian Board of Examiners really is to go along the lines of what David was saying, is really to establish an even playing field of body of knowledge established by the ACCE, but also relevant to the Canadian regulatory framework, and really gives some oversight to that and executing the different examination and assessment processes. Next slide, please. Currently, we have our board consists of 10 members across Canada, 9 of those certified, and they have usually generally progression from secretary, well, maybe our secretary doesn't know that, to chair-elect to the chairperson. And next slide, please. And of course, going back to the ISO 17024, you know, we had gone through this assessment in keeping with the ISO standard around these sort of certification boards, and that was quite a bit of effort we did many years ago. Our current chair is Andrew Ivey here in Ottawa. Our former chair, Marie-Ange Janvier, Dr. Marie-Ange Janvier, I see she's on. Hello, Marie-Ange, and Rachel Zhang. Next slide, please. And so really, what does governance mean in terms of our board? You know, the ACCE is the sponsoring legal entity of the certification program. HTCC oversees it. In that, there are actually 2 bodies. There's the United States Board of Examiners and the Canadian Board of Examiners. And we partner quite closely with the Canadian Medical and Biological Engineering Society, who do a lot of advocating for both certification of clinical engineers, but also BMET certification here in Canada. Next slide, please. This is just some housekeeping. If you want to pursue your certification through this avenue, which is certainly possible, there are deadlines around and when, you know, when applications need to be submitted. Oral examinations in the past have typically been through our annual CMBES conference, but now we've sort of transitioned to virtual assessments and oral examinations. But I would encourage everybody to accenet.org, lots of resources and lots of information there about certification. Next slide, please. So what are the requirements? One of the things in Canada is we heavily rely on, and sort of alluding to somewhat opposite what Dr. Sharma was saying, you know, we have in Canada, the regulation of the provincial, of the engineering title, so to speak. So if you were to have a title of an engineer, in fact, you have to be registered as a professional engineer. And that's under the regulatory body of each of the provinces. So we take advantage of that. And so the Canadian board really doesn't necessarily have to vet international academic credentials. That one of the requirements to proceed is you have to be registered with your provincial body as an engineer. And in that, there is quite a thorough assessment process. You have to have 3 or more years of clinical engineering practice, and then some support reference documentations to actually initiate this process. Next slide, please. The written examination is piggybacked alongside the same examination from the Board of Examiners in the States. We actually work hand in hand in reviewing the questions, scoring them, you know, assessing difficulty. And it's really, all of these questions are based on the body of knowledge, with the exception of really specific US standards and regulatory questions. Those are actually removed for the Canadian candidates who are writing, and we deal them and we assess those in another avenue. Next question, next slide, please. And we do that through the oral examination. So the oral examination is situational. We use these scenarios, so to speak, to utilize basic knowledge, complex ideas. And we work hand in hand with the US board to construct these scenarios that we walk through the different candidates. However, in Canada, we add a 4th scenario, and that tackles the regulatory framework and environment in Canada that we've sort of excluded out of the written examination. One of the important things is that's assessed as well is the ability to express clinical engineering ideas succinctly, clearly, because as we all know, when you're at that C-suite, you may have 5 or 10 minutes to communicate something very clearly and important, and focus on those important aspects. Next slide, please. So this is the 4 scenarios as just sort of an example of how we would assess a particular candidate. Next slide, please. You can go through you have to go through a renewal process every 3 years, or you have to, this is ongoing education, ongoing practice. So you still have to meet these minimum standards of participation within the field. Next slide, please. Sensitive to time here. Once you're retired, you actually can retain your CCE status either as a retired CCE or a emeritus CCE. So just because you've stopped working, you still get to still be a proud certified clinical engineer, I guess you can say. Next slide, please. Demographics, I pulled this off the ACCE website. In Canada, we have a total of 23 certified clinical engineers, and that's to the hard work of the Canadian Board of Certification, Canadian Board of Examiners. Next slide, please. And this is where we are sort of distributed out across the country. We've got a big hotspot here in Ottawa, where I am, Toronto and area. And we have 2 actually from Quebec, and one of which is on our board, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. Why? And David alluded to it as well. We work in an organization where, particularly, at least in Ontario, there are over 25 regulatory healthcare professionals. And at the end of the day, when in Rome, do as Romans do. And in my particular situation, our entire biomedical engineering department are either CCEs or they're BMED certified. And I challenged them many, many years ago. I said, we're going to do this. And I had to walk the walk. And so I was actually the first one to actually get certified. And it took a while, and we got through it. It's a recognition of professional competency in the role of clinical engineering. Right now, whenever I recruit new clinical engineers, I demand that they be certified. That might shorten the pool, so to speak, a bit, but if I do have a great candidate, there is a minimum requirement for them to have that completed within a year. So I'm demanding it, and I think that is a really way for managers and directors and VPs in organizations now to sort of roll that in. It certainly helps for career advancement. We've had, I know of many persons who are traveling across the borders between the United States and Canada with respect. And the CCE designation is recognizable in our field, in our family of clinical engineering. It sets an example for your technologists and technicians to seek out CBET certification. And hopefully at some instances, it's actually driven by the C-suite or the senior administration of the organization. What I'll also ask, will also comment is your accreditation body of healthcare organizations, whether it be the Joint Commission in the States or Accreditation Canada here, that is a good avenue for when you go through that accreditation of your hospital process, that these are demanded. And I know CMBS has partnered with Accreditation Canada to bring forward standards of practice as it relates to clinical engineering coming out of the CMBS. Next slide, please. And how? In our case in Canada, we actually partner quite closely with the US board, and I think it's a good thing for us. Is it a challenge sometimes? And those challenges can be accommodated, particularly from a regulatory perspective. The other challenge when we think about Quebec, it's quite expensive to translate these questions. So it's interesting, David's comment in China, we do their written examination in English, but we will actually execute their oral examination in their language, in French. And so we do have a good set of board members who actually do that in that language. Start at the grassroots. I know when I teach at the university, it's extremely important to put the seed of certification in clinical engineering in general at the undergraduate level. So when they get to that point where they're about to graduate, they're in a position and very familiar with what their profession and what certification in that process of credentialing will be. And lead by example. My story is at the time when I decided to be certified, the Canadian board was actually in a bit of hiatus. And so I said, because I was leading by example, I actually ended up going down to the States to get my certification. And then I came back in the goal and partnered with Dr. Tony Easty and Dr. Bill Gentles and sort of resurrect the board again. And it's nice to see our numbers are coming up and we're getting applicants every year. And so at the end of the day, it's a personal choice, but I think it's extremely important. And my last question, I know I'm talking way too much here. My last comment I will say is one of the reasons why is around pay equity, is around regulatory professionals that you work with. And that was one of the arguments that I put forth to my technologist staff to say, make no mistake, at some point there will be pay equity exercises. There will be recognition of certification, association with colleges. And it's important as a profession to have that same benchmark or that same oversight for your profession because we work amongst them at length. Okay, 3 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Tim. That very nice presentation, very clear and understandable of the certification program in Canada and the United States. Please forgive us attendees that we've gone a little over time, but Brian promises to do this in less than 10 minutes in his next presentation. Brian Kearney will be presenting in place of Peter Granger. Peter's picture was on the advertisement for this, but it's Brian delivering the presentation. And Brian has a Bachelor's of Engineering with honors in Electrical and Electronic Engineering and a Master's in Bioengineering from Trinity College in Dublin. He's currently a member of the senior management team with the Community Health Organization and is past Chief Operating Officer in Hospital Management of a regional acute hospital. Brian's a member of IFMBE CED Board and Collaborators Group. He's also the immediate past chair and current professional development officer of the National Body for Biomedical Clinical Engineers in Ireland. And he's currently leading a team on the development of a clinical engineering certification and credentialing system within Ireland. So with that, Brian, please.
Thank you, Frank. And hello, everyone from Ireland. It's 8 o'clock here, so slightly earlier than India. I'm just going to, as Frank said, try and take you through a whistle-stop tour of Ireland's journey to date in terms of certification of clinical engineering practitioners in Ireland. By all means, it's not as developed as Timothy's in Canada or as the US, but it's something we're really, focused on progressing to, and it gives us something to aim towards, I suppose. So the first slide I just want to talk about is why we think it's important. And there is the recognition of clinical engineers, like what Yadin has spoke about earlier, in terms of recognizing the importance and the professional competency associated with a clinical engineer, just like a doctor or a nurse or another healthcare professional. We also have the situation in Ireland where we have regulation of certain health and social care professionals. And we have found, based on historical events, that if we have a situation where the profession is regulated or is certified in a voluntary basis, it does make it a little bit easier to transition over to a formal regulation under the Act. So that is something that we're aiming to do in that way, to transition us into the future. And I suppose lastly, well, we believe ultimately that it's important to encourage and promote the high standards. So it's trying to ensure that all our clinical engineers meet certain standards, that they continue with professional development along their careers, and because it's the right thing to do. And in everything we do, we try and keep the patient at the center. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give just 2 or 3 slides in terms of the Irish context, just to let you know what we're basing some of our decisions and some of our design of this certification scheme on. So we have an act here that was brought back in 2005 under an EU directive. And that allows for the regulation and registration of health and social care professionals, of which overall in the Irish Health Service, they take up about 25% of the clinical workforce in Ireland. There's 26 professions that are categorized under these HSCPs. So we have ourselves as clinical engineers, we have our close colleagues, medical physicists, we also have physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and so on. And a body was set up a number of years ago known as CORU to be the state body for regulation of these HSCPs. And currently 12 of those professions have been registered, and clinical engineering isn't on their next phase to be registered. And that's an interesting topic. And we believe, because it's quite complex, definitely in Ireland, to register these because of the interaction between clinical engineers in the hospitals and the industry involvement in the healthcare industry as well. We think that it does make it a little bit more complex. So they're not listed in the upcoming phase. Next slide, please. Just back one, Conroy, sorry. So going back on a little bit of the history, just to briefly mention, we started to look at this and there was some very leading people back in 2003. Sorry, Conroy, just one slide forward. Back in 2003, who set up a voluntary registration board. And a bit like what Timothy was saying there in terms of engineering titles, we had based it on those engineering titles, on the charter titles involved from the engineering institution. The thing was that the chartership was not required by the health service employers as a prerequisite when they were employing a clinical engineering technician or a clinical engineer in the service. So that voluntary registration board isn't really active anymore. And in 2015, as the BEI, it's a professional organization in Ireland, made a decision to progress what we called at the time registration, which later led us onto the journey really of certification and credentialing in terms of how we were going to move forward with this. So what we've done is we've developed a scheme. It does take into consideration, and we've designed it to take into consideration the core regulations to future-proof it, and also the international requirements. So we've liaised with the likes of Jim Weir and Mario Medvedev in terms of the IFMBE requirements and the looking forward in terms of the ICB and the International Credentialing Board piece. And what we've done is we've obviously left it has to be voluntary for now. But we do believe that in the future, we do think there's going to be huge weight associated with having this, like what Timothy said there in Canada about employment opportunities into the future. So next slide, please. So I just want to take you through some of the core components that are involved in the scheme, just to give you an idea of what we've based it on currently. So we know that into the future, the ICB, one of the literature reviews we did was a paper that Jim Weir had published back in 2020, talking about how the ICB was planning to look and planning to formulate itself. And we looked at whether it was credentials only or credentials plus an exam and moving into that certification space. And the route that was chosen in Ireland at present is certification by credentialing. So we're not currently going towards an exam. And it's interesting the question that Yadin had put up there in terms of, is that enough? And I'll come to that in terms of our considerations and next steps, because it's something that we've thought about in Ireland as well. So within this protocol, we have our certification boards, and we have various different pieces there that you'll see on the screen that we're trying to cover in the protocol to bring people through this process. And just in the interest of time, I won't take you through all those. Next slide, please. So in terms of the certification board, we have the establishment of the first board to happen. And that involves the various governance and structures in place that we need, and the membership and composition of that board, and then putting in place the operational plans that are involved in how the board would practice. Various colleagues and panelists on this webinar have mentioned the international standards for certification. So that ISO 17024 is an important standard that we've taken into account in terms of our protocol and the development of that, to try and give us some structure there. And we're hoping that the IFMBE and other colleagues internationally can assist in terms of development of bylaws for the certification scheme to run. And as I said, we also are taking account of our own national regulation requirements, which we call CORU, and recognizing this certification scheme by our international colleagues with the ICB. Next slide, please. So we have two levels that we're looking at. We have a certified clinical engineer and technologist practitioner, and then we have a certified clinical engineer and practitioner. And within that, we have two different routes. So we have a grandparenting or grandfathering route, which is the transitional pathway for existing practitioners, where we're planning to open this for a 2-year period, where there will be various different pieces that they will have to prove of people who are already in the roles, to prove their professional practice, have all the relevant vetting procedures done, and have hold relevant qualifications, or potentially complete a competency test. And then we have our second route, which will be open at the same time for new graduates, which will be just a standard route going forward. Next slide, please. Within the eligibility, we've kind of 5 main pillars there. We have our educational requirements and qualifications, which I'll touch on in a minute from the Irish Health Services point of view. We also have a relevant work experience. So a detail of what exactly you've done in your career to date. We also require current proof of professional employment or your work position. So what you're currently doing and where you are in the organization, I suppose, in terms of leadership roles. We look for a detailed CV to describe your career history, and also various references. Next slide, please. So we've taken the approach that in the initial stages, we're focusing on using the health services recruitment processes to be able to vet some of these qualifications and fitness to practice and health and so on, and that we require within this scheme. And I just have put down some information there in terms of the public service appointments piece. There was an act in 2004 that was brought in Ireland, which set up a commission for public service appointments, and the health service operates under that commission, which allows our National Health Service to have responsibility for setting out and approving qualifications. So for every clinical engineer that's operating in the health service, they have to have gone through from that point onwards this rigorous process to be appointed into the job. And that eligibility at recruitment stage looks at qualifications, skills, and experience relevant to the role. So we're utilizing that existing system to try and streamline our processes. Next slide, please. This just gives an example of the job descriptions, and I just want to draw your attention. I don't expect you to be able to read the size of the text on that, but you'll see that they have, for clinical engineering, they have a minimum, what's known as a National Framework of Qualifications, or an NFQ, of a level 7, which is an ordinary degree. And we also then have a honours degree, which is a level 8. And our qualifications within the health service look for, depending on the grade that you're recruited on, you also have to have a minimum number of X number of years experience, depending on what grade that is. Next slide, please. I've just, again, just for reference, I've put in 2 tables that we did in terms of analysing the various grades across the health service. And because it's an interesting structure, we have 4 grades at clinical engineering, technologist or technician grade, and we also have physicist grades, which are operated within the clinical engineering sphere. So they colleagues in clinical engineering utilize the physics grade. So that grading structure is currently being looked at. So that will just show you some of the, it gives you a bit of a breakdown of the experience required and the professional qualifications that the health service requests when you're submitting an application. Next slide, please. We also have a Cpd protocol in our certification scheme, which is detailed there on the slides, and which includes the candidate having to submit a personal learning plan, and they have to do reflective learning reports on all events to gain these Cpd points. Next slide, please. So I've just posed some considerations that Ireland are trying to just finalise. One thing is our health service makeup. So we have public health services. We also have what are called voluntary health services, which are governed by a board and not by the National Health Service, but they're funded by the National Health Service. And then we have our private health service bodies as well. And the challenges there is how they all recruit people and how they vet people is slightly different. So how we take account for that within our certification scheme is important to consider. We also have a large medtech industry in Ireland, and the medtech industry provide quite a lot of support within the Irish Health Service and carry out clinical engineering roles within our hospitals on a day-to-day basis. So how do we certify or ensure that they're operating at the same standards as what we're operating as? We don't hold that same recruitment requirement for our industry colleagues. So how do we do it? And we've worked with the healthcare health tech industry in terms of them. They've set up a credentialing program, but it's more focused on conducting business within the healthcare facilities. It's not as focused on engineers. So we need to figure out how we're going to navigate that sphere. And that's partly why it's harder to regulate, we believe, the clinical engineers in the country. But we're going to go as far as we can with it and continue working with our industry colleagues. And then we also have to consider the ISO standards in terms of the exam-based sphere, and the fact that right now where we're going with credentialing doesn't include a written exam, not like our American or Canadian colleagues. And just at the end, doesn't include the written exam. So therefore, it's more than likely going to be a phasing approach where we do a phase 1 where we have just credentialing. Next slide, please. Next steps, publish the full protocol. We've had good positive feedback to date from international colleagues. Set up our national examining authority. And also, as I said, start on a phase basis, go experience credentials, and then move towards an exam based into the future. So I hope I've given you a whistle-top tour as to how Ireland have approached this. And if anyone wants to contact me afterwards and discuss it in further detail, my contact details are in front of you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was an outstanding presentation. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, we're at the end of our webinar, and the webinar has been a complete success. Even though we went 15 minutes overtime. First of all, 120 attendees stayed to the end. That was the first thing. And secondly, the topic was so important that every one of our speakers went overtime in presenting their case. So, so as a result, we don't have time for questions, but I would like to remind everyone that the recording of this session and the PowerPoint presentation will, in not too long in the future, will be posted on globalcea.org. And I would like to make a suggestion, and I think we'll probably do this, but there are 9 questions still in the Q&A bin, and I think what we'll do is we'll try to, amongst the faculty, print those questions out, and each one of us will try to answer the questions, and we'll put that document in writing on the globalcea.org website. So you will get a benefit of those answers that everyone was interested in hearing. So with that, thank you very much. It was wonderful to have so many people here, so encouraging. Thank you for the organizers, and thank you in particular for the presenters. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.